Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, March 11th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about President Trump yet again because it looks as if he's going to be spending his money and his resources in a very wasteful way entering into the 2022 midterm elections. Now, what you might notice is that on his website, donaldjtrump.com, it looks very similar to how it did previously, prior to the election, the 2020 election and the 2021 runoff elections in Georgia. But what you'll notice is that some of the logos have changed. Rather than Donald Trump, you see Save America in the top right corner of the screen. And if you do a little bit more exploring on here, you'll notice that this is paid for by the Save America JFC. Essentially, this is a joint fundraising committee between Donald Trump's Make America Great Again PAC and the Save America PAC that ultimately is going to be funding President Trump's endeavors and his his Trump-backed candidates' endeavors entering into 2022 and beyond. Now, what you might remember is that I made a video that you can check out at the top right corner of the screen talking about Lisa Murkowski and Donald Trump. I don't know if you remember, but Donald Trump pledged to go against Lisa Murkowski in her Alaska Senate race, and I talked about why this would be a futile effort because Alaska, while may not loving Lisa Murkowski, has a system in place called ranked choice voting. Now, President Trump will be the first presidential candidate or president to even campaign in the state, dating all the way back to the 1960s. So this was never really a competitive state, but President Trump, knowing that it's not super competitive, is targeting it because he knows his impact there could alter the outcome of a primary. But the problem is, what we're going to see is that Lisa Murkowski is going to be able to get on that ballot through ranked choice voting and receive plenty Democratic votes. Now, I'm not going to talk too in depth about ranked choice voting, what it does, but essentially all of those moderate Republicans and Democratic Party voters will essentially be voting the same way by the end of the final round. And I think that's going to ultimately squash President Trump's endeavors in the state and the impact he has on the overall results. But with the Save America PAC, it looks as if in 2020, he raised a total of $31.51 million. That's a lot of money raised. We're talking about money that was raised on the idea that the election was rigged. Rather than the 2020 election, which was a different PAC that was under President Trump. It was just part of his campaign. But looking at the Save America PAC, $31 million that was raised in 2020, and if he continues to make these public appearances like the one at CPAC or sending out these statements that will be circulating around conservative social media sites and Fox News, you will start to notice that he will begin to raise more money. You can expect his website, donaldjtrump.com, to pretty much revolutionize into a very similar website, comparable to the National Republican Senate Committee. And this is actually Senatorial Committee. And this website actually counteracts what Donald Trump does. They're asking, help us take back the Senate, referring, of course, to the GOP being in the minority at this point. But President Trump has announced that he will not back rhinos with his money, saying that don't support the NRSC, don't support those Republican PACs that have been there for a very long time, but rather support his PAC, the Save America PAC. No more money for rhinos. Rhinos mean Republican in name only. Essentially, it's saying as if these Republicans are just that. They say they're Republicans, but they're not conservative in their actions. And he's labeled plenty of staunch conservatives like Doug Ducey, Brian Kemp, and even some who are more moderate, but certainly more Republican than Democratic, Susan Collins, notably Lisa Murkowski. And these are senators that have voted with him 95% of the time, but because of that 5%, he labels them as rhinos. And he says that they should, these supporters, rather than send their money to an institution that elected Republicans in every election in the 21st century, to rather send their money to the Save America PAC. And the thing for the Republican Party is that they will get a dip in fundraising, because Donald Trump will certainly be taking money from them, as he already has. If this PAC was not around and the GOP funneled their own money, looking at the $31 million there, it probably would have gone to the GOP rather than Donald Trump. But now Donald Trump has free reign in the way that he handles this money in terms of backing certain candidates. Now, rather than focus on the threat of the Democratic Party holding on to the majority in 2022, it looks as if he's going to spend a lot of his energy on primary races, like Lisa Murkowski and a couple of others. President Trump's targets are not beyond Alaska, but realistically speaking, that is a state where resources are going to be wasted. Plainly put, wasted. President Trump does not have the influence he thinks he has in Alaska. It was the closest Alaska presidential race in decades. There's a reason for that. On top of that, looking at this state, it would just be such a poor use of money, given the state's partisan nature. And while Lisa Murkowski may not be the most popular senator, she will be saved by ranked choice voting. So, Alaska seems to be on Trump's target list, at least by initial characterization, but he also mentioned that he will be targeting those senators who voted against him, those representatives who voted to convict him and voted to impeach him. This includes Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey and North Carolina Senator Richard Burr. Now, the thing is, besides these two senators, everyone else is either just now reelected or not going to run again. Pat Toomey and Richard Burr are not going to run again. So those 7 Republicans that voted to convict President Trump, they were either just reelected or they're not running again. None of them are in a competitive position besides Lisa Murkowski, but as we know, it's a waste of money for Donald Trump there. It's a waste of time and effort. But with these 2 races in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, since the Republicans are retiring, they become open races. And President Trump certainly wants to have an impact on the outcome of the race here, because if he can get a Trump-backed candidate there and to the Senate, he will have an influence in the United States congressional delegation, as he already does, but those that were directly impacted by the Save America PAC. But the problem is that Donald Trump is not popular. The problem is that Donald Trump left with the highest disapproval rating of his entire presidency, 1,400 plus days, and Donald Trump seemed to be at the worst point on his final one. That's not good. President Trump, with these efforts and with these targets so far, which will extend well beyond the 3 that we see currently, seem to be just a split between the GOP. Because the NRSC has already announced that they will back their incumbent senators. They will back whoever is endorsed mainly by these incumbent senators, and they won't work side by side with Donald Trump, or so they say. And, looking at the presence of President Trump, he's taking money away from the GOP where they previously did well. Now, looking at the 2016 Senate election results, this is the same map that is up in 2022. What you'll notice is that the GOP actually had the majority back then. They had the majority as recently, through 2018 up till 2020, since 2014. And this was a Senate map where we actually saw a number of Republicans outperform Donald Trump. If you remember, Donald Trump won the state of Florida by around 1 point in 2016, while Marco Rubio won it by nearly 7. More than 7. Nearly 8, 7.7%. What we'll remember is that Donald Trump won the state of North Carolina by around 4 points. Well, what we saw was that Richard Burr won by over 5 points. In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump won by 0.73% or 72%. Pat Toomey won by 1.5%. And in Wisconsin, Donald Trump won by 0.77%, and the GOP won that Senate race by nearly 4 points. What you'll notice down in Georgia is a state that Donald Trump won by a pretty large amount, 5 points, but the Republican here won by double digits. Almost everywhere, with a few exceptions, the GOP outperformed Donald Trump compared to the presidential ballot. Even when he was on the ballot in 2016, he did not bring them over the finish line. Now, I think if Hillary Clinton was to win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, maybe the Senate results could have been different. But ultimately, if they hadn't, we would still see the GOP in control, and she wouldn't have been able to move over North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Arizona, very partisan states in the way that they had voted. I also have to take a look at 2018, where we saw the GOP underperform when Donald Trump was campaigning for some of these candidates. Is it too common to see a Democrat win in West Virginia? Not at all. Even though Donald Trump visited the state of West Virginia, a state that he won by nearly 40 points in 2020, he wasn't able to have a robust impact that he thought he would have. He was able to flip the states of Indiana, Missouri, Florida, and North Dakota. And while he didn't do it alone, he certainly had an impact, but you also have to point out that these states were closer than traditionally expected on a presidential map. Donald Trump wasn't able to replicate his victories in 2017, 2018, 2019, or in 2020. 2016 seemed to be that peak year for the GOP because they had a trifecta. No longer, as you now know. And looking at the Senate results in 2020, I point out the Georgia Senate elections. The Georgia Senate elections where the Democratic Party focused a lot of money and a lot of time here, as did the GOP. Donald Trump spent this entire campaign talking about how the election was rigged, talking about how David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler would be the best candidates for these Senate races and having a huge impact on the outcome here. Well, ultimately, even though the Democratic Party won control of the House, and this would have been the true checks and balance system against the Democratic Party, just the way that the government should work with a checks and balances system, the voters here had enough of Donald Trump. Rather than elect Republicans again, they elected 2 new Democrats to Senate seats here, defeating 2 incumbents by larger margins than they voted for Joe Biden. In fact, Raphael Warnock's margin here was nearly tenfold that of Joe Biden. So looking at 2022, I'm not too hopeful for what Trump can do for some of these Republicans. While he had a tremendous impact on certain down ballot races in the House and in the state legislature races, he ultimately lost the GOP the control of the United States Senate. Even though the losses were bad for the Democratic Party, they still had a trifecta. That cannot be ignored. President Trump promised a red wave, and he got blowback for that. He didn't get it. And looking ahead of 2022, it looks as if rather than focus his money on races that are super competitive on the Republican side, Wisconsin, right? We're talking Georgia, or not just with the Republican incumbents, but states that they had won previously. Arizona, New Hampshire. What are we looking at now? President Trump is vowing to work against these rhinos. First of all, he's not going to be too fond of Chris Sununu up in New Hampshire. I'll tell you that. He's not going to be too fond of Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. He might not be too fond of some Republicans that are propped up in Georgia and Arizona, depending on who makes it through the primary. And while he will want to have an impact, a large impact, this focus on rhinos, this obsession, puts him in a difficult position. Because the NRSC is going to be directly conflicting in many races with the approach and with the candidates that the Save America PAC wants to field, we are going to see it ultimately come down to the establishment versus Trump. But the problem is Trump is not on this ballot. Trump is not the one running for Senate. So when Trump will have a backed candidate, sure, that will help them, but it won't be as large of an impact as if Donald Trump was the president or if Donald Trump was on the ballot himself. Already seeing him start to ramp up efforts against these rhinos. Article after article with different types of announcements and different types of press releases giving us the same idea as to what to expect from Donald Trump for 2022. And it's wasteful. He is encouraging donations to his PAC rather than the GOP. This is something that is going to be, even looking at this, Trump's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to the RNC and the NRSC, what I just showed you, and the NRCC to stop using his name and likeness for fundraising and merchandise sales. The reason? He wants the money to allocate the resources the way he wants to. It's all about Trump. And the problem is, Trump isn't a winner. Yes, he may have had good performances in 2020, but what did that do? Outside of, picking up seats in the House, he lost 3 seats in the Senate. He lost the presidency. He still lost the House. Picking up seats means you got closer. The Democrats gained seats in 2016. Did they win the majority? No. And while the majority may be slim, you cannot ignore the very real fact that when Trump ran in 2020, the GOP still lost. They are clinging onto a losing candidate. They want to replicate those pickups. But for what reason? You can pick up 11 seats and still not have the majority. They picked up more than that and still didn't get the majority. It was narrower, much narrower than it was before. But if their peak is Donald Trump and they couldn't even win the majority then and they were at a loss in the House, the Senate, and the presidency, what's next? And now that we're starting to see a lot of this money go to Trump, and he's already making these promises with such a low approval rating, realistically speaking, his impact might only be detrimental. Joe Biden is a popular president right now. We're talking about a net approval, 13. It's lower than before. I would say not significantly lower, noticeably lower, but it's not at a bad point. After his speech tonight, I think it might actually rebound a little bit to a higher approval rating. But looking at 2022, President Trump might just spend money on the wrong races, on the wrong primaries, simply out of spite. And we're already starting to see tens of millions of dollars funneled in. I mean, this is 2020. This is talking, November to December. And looking at what is yet to come, President Trump might become the highest might have the highest earning Republican PAC out of all of them. And he's already asking them to stop using his name. They're already asking him to, stop using. He's already asking them to stop using his name in ads, name in merchandise for fundraising efforts. No more emails sent out. President Trump needs your support. President Trump's donors will match it 3-4 times. We know that's not true, first of all. But number two, we are going to start to see that only President Trump will be the one using his name. And while that may have a big impact on the primary and make him feel as if he had an impact on the candidates that run in certain races, he ultimately won't benefit them in the general election. President Trump has vowed to help campaign for them, but realistically speaking, did it work in 2020? The answer is no. Did it work in the Georgia runoff elections? The answer is absolutely not. President Trump is going to raise a lot of money, but you do have to ask, for what? Why is he still going to be this top name when he couldn't do what he promised in 2020? So ultimately, this boils down to President Trump's agenda and the fact that he wants to be very spiteful to these Republicans that turned their backs on him after the 2020 election, after the Capitol insurrection. So while it is his money that he's going to be fundraising, and it is up to him entirely as to what to do with it, it looks as if he may actually be wasting resources and spending it on states and primary elections that, while may momentarily boost his ego and make him feel secure about the Republican candidates that are running, he might ultimately serve as a detriment in the 2022 general election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.